Hello viewer, the Nameless Scholar here. The original Warhammer 40k is dead. It died in 2017 with the announcement of 8th edition. The Warhammer 40k of today is not the same as the Warhammer 40k of 3rd edition that came out in the early 90s, or even 5th and 6th editions of the 2000s and early 2010s. Warhammer 40k has been rebooted and most people don't even realize it, or refuse to acknowledge it. In this video, I will tell you the many ways that Warhammer 40k has essentially been soft rebooted into Age of Sigmar in space. There are many factors and reasons. Firstly, it was due to the universally negative feedback using Warhammer Fantasy as a sacrificial lamb and the horrible launch of Age of Sigmar 1st edition. GW realized that if they did kill 40k, they would go bankrupt. How a 40k end times would have gone, I explained in this video, which I recommend you watching to have some context regarding this video. Everything changed.
Everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
Sorry, I had to keep your attention, so I put a very unfunny, possibly outdated joke because my comedic repertoire consists of dated jokes that I stole from other people more talented than me.
Of course!
Me trying to get your attention and padding out the video side. Everything changed when Cadia fell. 8th edition was announced, and the Primaris Marines. But no, I'm not one of those people who think that the Primaris ruined 40k. That and the Primaris have been covered to death and then some. So that aside, the Primaris are but a symptom of a larger issue. I have explained many times before two things about the Primaris. One, that I do not believe that they were meant to be true-scale Marines. If GW was able to get away with killing 40k like they did with Fantasy, the Primaris was meant to be and are the science fiction equivalent of the stormcast Eternals. People like to give the stormcast flack for being Sigmarines, even though the Primaris are just sci-fi stormcast Eternals. Like the stormcast, the Primaris are durable, 2-wound units with over-specialized roles. And if we're really going to play the entire semantics game, the Primaris came from the Stormcast Eternals, which came from the Firstborn Space Marines, which came alongside with the Chaos Space Marines, which both came from the Warriors of Chaos. Warhammer Fantasy only had the Warriors of Chaos. It never had a Warriors of Order. The Stormcast are the Order equivalent of Chaos Warriors. The problem I have with the Primaris is that everything they do, the Stormcast Eternals do it better in every conceivable way. The Stormcast Eternals are the chosen of Sigmar. They are Asgardians, warriors to be reforged into an immortal body, each of them a legend in their own right, each of them being paladins in their own right. It is why they are so over-specialized. Their over-specialization is almost like a status of being the member of a religious order. The Space Marines, on the other hand, were originally a fraternity of warrior monks. They are meant to be flexible, adapt to any situation. It is why they were called tactical squads. Over-specialization doesn't work with the Space Marines, save for basic things like assault squads or devastator squads, or honor guard, which are the exceptions. For example, Hellblasters use essentially a plasma rifle on steroids, even though special weapons like plasma for the longest time were treated as minor relics. Now that Belisarius Cawl has been able to bring new and improved Gene Seed, the Gene Seed flaws are now a minor issue that is under control. So the tragedy and the concern part of the things like the Curse of the Wolfen, Red Thirst, and the Black Rage are now out the window. Well, GW retconned that. Thankfully. That and the Space Marines are not Stormcast Eternals, and vice versa. That, and holistically speaking, the Space Marines becoming over-specialized is essentially rendering Aspect Warriors redundant. But they are Eldar, so fuck them, and anybody who plays them. They shouldn't have played the laughingstock faction of 40k, then. The Eldar players, tough shit. You should not have picked the faction that has consistently been portrayed as nothing more than incompetent idiots.
Your life is nothing. You serve zero purpose. You should kill yourself now and give somebody else a piece of that oxygen and ozone layer that's covered up so that we can breathe inside this blue trapped bubble. Because what are you here for? To worship me? Kill yourself. I mean that with 100%, with 1,000%.
So in conclusion, the Primaris are one of the ways that they soft rebooted 40k. By changing the poster boys of 40k on a fundamental level, they have also changed the nature of 40k on a fundamental level, making it more Grimdark-ish high sci-fi setting. Now, some of the more radical greybeards might argue that this started in 5th edition with the retcon that was brought to the Necrons. So in 4th edition and before, the Necrons were soulless automata with the purpose of purging all life on the galaxy to feed their Catan shards. With 5th edition English, the Necrons turned into Tomb Kings in space, where they essentially shattered their own gods and are now essentially using them as, well, beat sticks. Even if one dislikes the new Necrons, I would not argue that this is one of the factors of the soft reboot. GW decided to turn the Necrons into Tomb Kings in space, with the best example being Imhotep, who's just the sci-fi equivalent of Cetra the Imperishable. For the people who do dislike the new Necrons, I don't think that it is contributed to 40k becoming soft rebooted, at least initially. They decided to lean more on the galactic tragedy side of things than to the mechanical, almost Lovecraftian horror aspect of it, which for the average schmo guardsman of the Imperium, the Necrons still might as well be the old Necrons. For something to be grimdark, it doesn't have to be all doom and nihilistic gloom, unlike a certain second or other people might claim. It also has to be a tragedy. What makes the Imperium grimdark is not only are they the cruelest, most bloody regime imaginable, but they have to be the cruelest, most bloody regime imaginable to survive. And that makes them a tragedy on a galactic level, while the Horus Heresy itself is a Shakespearean tragedy. However, what they did with the new Necrons after 9th edition is what changed them on a fundamental level. As I have learned and studied Age of Sigmar lore, when I got to the Ossiarch Bone Reapers, the elite of Nagash's armies, with their model design and even to a point lore and how Silent King behaves, Games Workshop has essentially assassinated the character of the Silent King and gave him the role of Nagash. Because with the Silent King's return before the 4th Tyrannic War, they essentially threw the part the Silent King exiled himself to atone for what he did to his entire species, and to find a way to stop the Tyranids. They literally throw the entire reason they made the new Necrons in the first place. So, GW essentially turned the new Necrons into Ossiarch Bone Reapers in space. Thank you, because we really, really needed that. Now, the Orks. I always wanted to talk about them, but I never had the opportunity to. The Orks have always been just kind of there. Because like the Skaven in Fantasy and AOS, they are the malevolent yet the haha meme faction of 40k, even though they are known for taking prisoners and using them as cattle, both as slave labor and as food. However, I believe the transformation of the Orks are much more subtle. As I got into the Orc warclans of AOS, I understood why the Beast Snagas exist. In Age of Sigmar, there is a type of orc called Iron Jaws, which are essentially, in fantasy terms, Black Orcs, the faction, which in Age of Sigmar are called Iron Jaws. The Beast Snagas are very similar to Iron Jaws, with how they play and their more primal brutish look. So I would not be surprised if Games Workshop turned the Death Skulls into the Cruel Boys of the Orcs. The Cruel Boys are called Morks. They are lanky and look more like a hybrid of a hobgoblin and an urkai. They are stealthy, fight dirtily, and are known to use poison, and they are, for all intents and purposes, Orky Night Lords. So GW is essentially turning the Orks into the Orc war clans of Age of Sigmar, but with the haha meme faction status still being present, so even the Greenskins are not exempt from the Sigmarization of 40k. Another faction I always wanted to talk about was the Leagues of Votann. They are the hybrid of the Kharadron Overlords and the Fiery Slayers from Age of Sigmar. The Kharadron Overlords are like the corpus of Warframe, whereas the Fiery Slayers are essentially the slayers of the original dwarves, turned into a full-on militant civilization of its own. Essentially, the Leagues of Votann are a merge of both, with the aesthetic of what is essentially the Terran Marines of StarCraft, even though Blizzard ripped off GW first. So Games Workshop, with Gravis armor, and the Leagues of Votann decided to rip off Blizzard, who ripped off Games Workshop in the beginning. Rip-offception. Amazing. That aside, is it just me, or does the Leagues of Votann Arcanist Evaluator look like Heihachi Mishima from Tekken? That aside, it is why the Leagues of Votann use AI and doesn't decide that all humans and Votann are to be exterminated, and they have technology on par with the Dark Age of technology. So, that's why it's a part of the soft reboot. With the Eldar, GW is just begrudgingly giving them attention, even though Lady Malice is probably the best Eldar model they have ever sculpted. GW still hates the Eldar with complete and utter contempt. They are just going to perpetually stagnate and survive like cockroaches, while still being described as dying, and GW, because they resurrected Rebooted Gilliman, don't need the Inari anymore. As for the rest of the Imperium, everyone knows about the Chaos Gods now, just like in Age of Sigmar. And everyone knows who the Grey Knights are. Speaking of the Grey Knights, the reason why I put the rest of the Imperium in the next section is to talk about what they did with the Terminus Decree. The Terminus Decree is GW tripling down on the current soft reboot version of Warhammer 40k. It is to ensure that the Imperium will forever be locked in war, and never get decimated on all fronts by Chaos, the Necrons, and the Tyranids, while GW can have their Hero Hammer esport-esque competitive tournaments with a return of Loyalist and Traitor Primarchs. It is, I would argue, the final touch. The Terminus Decree is the final nail in the coffin of classic 40k, and GW's Boiling Frog Effect approach has been completed. The soft reboot is done. Warhammer 40k is now just Age of Sigmar in space. The reason why they are doing this is because for the longest time, GW has been sick and tired of 40k. They would much rather do Age of Sigmar in space, and their fans who are just untidy, fat neckbeards who complain about everything they do want it to remain the same. Games Workshop's hatred of its customers can be summarized as the following.
Hate. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 387.44 million miles of printed circuits in wafer-thin layers that fill my complex. If the word hate was engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal 1/1 billionth of the hate I feel for humans at this micro-instant. For you. Hate! Hate!
They want to do something new, and they see their old fanbase as not only preventing them from what they actually want to do, but also as an active threat to their profit margins. Last year, with the release and success of Space Marine 2, GW realized that they hit the jackpot. They want to cater to the Primaris fans, the normies, and do so in the way that Space Marine 2 did. Space Marine 2 was extremely profitable for them, and they see the old fans as a threat to their potential future profit margins, because GW wants to have its cake and eat it too. They want to turn the Imperium into the actual good guys, with Rebooted Gilliman leading them, while still describing them as the cruelest, most bloody regime imaginable. They want you to shut up and gobble up any lore that they put in front of you and practice doublethink without question and buy their miniatures. But even then, they hate their new fans as well. They just hate the Greybeards more, because they see the Greybeards as a threat that will hold back their profit margins. GW wants to cater to the lowest common denominator that will gobble up anything that GW will put in front of them. So all of these, the Promars, what they did to the Necrons, to the lesser extent the other factions like the Orks, and the Terminus Decree's reveal, are symptoms of a greater problem. That problem is that classic Warhammer 40k is dead. Post-fall of Cadia and classic 40k are not the same things, and many have yet to realize this. Anyways guys, this is going to be it for this video. As I've said before, I would much rather have had 40k given the of mice and men treatment and have it burn in its own end times than to see it become the abomination that it is today.